Although there are certain factors such as symmetry, averageness, and sexual dimorphism that make a face attractive, what this channel is yet to delve into is how our own backgrounds influence our perceptions of beauty. In a 1993 study by Zebrowitz and colleagues, 24 Korean, 20 white American, and 24 African American male college students had their faces rated by members of their own ethnic group. They found that judges agreed more strongly on what's attractive when judging their own ethnic group. In other words, familiarity with a certain facial prototype helps us evaluate beauty in different ways. This idea of a facial prototype actually relates back to philosophy through Plato's theory of forms. I'll paraphrase and simplify it for you. Essentially, what we have on Earth in tangible form, so something that you can see and feel, is an imperfect imitation of its abstract idea. If I were to ask you to draw a tree, depending on your skill, you draw either this to this. In theory, it won't be perfect no matter how hard you try. But if I ask you to draw what you imagine a tree to look like, in your mind you have a general idea of what the perfect tree looks like. So our visualizations might not be the same, but they're both trees. The idealistic tree is this prototype. Through exposure to different faces, typically in the West it's European Caucasian faces, we've come to develop an idea of what the ideal European face looks like. It's why they're rated the highest on almost every cross-cultural attractiveness study, not because the participants are trying to push an ethnocentric agenda, but because they're not as experienced at evaluating other faces from other ethnicities. One of the criteria for attractiveness is sexual dimorphism. In Caucasian faces, due to increased familiarity, it's easier to spot sexually dimorphic traits between male and female faces. But as this paper by Burke et al. Explains, participants were less familiar with differentiating dimorphic features between African faces. As such, the women rated considerably lower, not because they were far from average or had some kind of physical deformity, but because the raters just didn't know how to properly evaluate their faces. Did they prefer a more Beyonce or a Dudakesh type of face? They didn't have time to form these ideals because of a lack of repeated exposure, and so were unable to properly evaluate averageness and dimorphism in ethnically African faces. Then they repeated the test by producing mixed-race faces. All of the test groups were rated as considerably more attractive by their own and other ethnicity judges, as they had more racially diverse features, which made it easier for everyone to judge. Faces with considerable facial averageness, in the sense that they have no unusual or distracting features, approach this idealized prototypical face. These prototypical faces are formed from repeated exposure, especially from our parents. We tend to choose features that resemble our opposite sex parent, so maybe Freud was right. Likewise, modeling and high fashion plays a role in choosing what to expose for that current paradigm. In Racial Ethnocentrism by Martin, 1964, the Black Nigerian test group and White American test group had more in common in determining attractiveness than the African American and Nigerian group in regards to black female faces. Despite being ethnically similar, their cultural standards were very different. Rural, Senegalese, and British judges found considerable common ground when rating American faces in Silver et al.'s paper. This familiarity effect is best seen in Coetzee et al.'s 2014 study, where white Scottish and black South African students were asked to judge the opposite sex for their own and the other ethnicities' test subjects. They hypothesized that South African students in Pretoria would have more in common, beauty standard-wise, with the Scottish students for white faces, as South Africa is multicultural with many people of Dutch European descent, and thus they'd have more European familiarity. In contrast, the Scottish group would have more difficulty in agreeing with the South Africans when determining attractiveness for the black faces, as they haven't been exposed to as many. The results showed exactly that, with slightly stronger correlation for ideal female European faces than ideal male European faces. So what can we take away from all of this? These experiments highlight the universality of facial attractiveness. Subjects with the most symmetric, dimorphic, and average faces were still the most attractive in all of these studies. The cultural aspect plays a role in how well you're able to evaluate these said features. Culture trains the eye to look for different things, but good genes are still good genes, regardless of whether you can see it or not. What we look for in faces depends on exposure, with the neoclassical Caucasian female face being the most common in modern media,